to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They were ordinary people who responded in an extraordinary way in extreme times. They rose to the nation's call because they wanted to protect the nation, which has given them us so much. And for that, we are grateful today. And we stand in remembrance of those that gave the ultimate sacrifice today. Now we will continue our service today, and it is a service of remembrance. And I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Sergeant Major Johnny Higdon. Sergeant Major Higdon is president of the Atlanta chapter of the National Point Marine Association, Incorporated. He exemplifies a life dedicated to service and leadership and community engagement. He's a proud veteran. Johnny began his journey in Thomasville, Georgia, and led him to an illustrious 30-year career in the U.S. Marine Corps. Give him a hand for that. Culminating his role as the Installation Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps Logistic Base in Albany, Georgia. Now, after retiring from the Marines in 2019, he founded Legacy Building Mentors, Incorporated. This is a nonprofit focused on aiding in underserved communities and established WES essential consulting, aimed at enhancing organizational performance by advising management on effective ways to motivate and to inspire the workforce. Sergeant Major Higdon's presidency of the Atlanta chapter of the National Montford Marine Association since 2021 has been marked by significant achievements. A highlight of his tenure is the discovery of over 12 original Montford Point Marines in 1 year, leading to the posthumous awarding of 11 congressional gold medals and 1 to a living Montford Point. Sergeant Major Higdon continues to be an inspiring figure, committed to ensuring that their contributions are forever remembered and celebrated. I'd like to introduce to you at this time, Sergeant Major Johnny Higdon.
Well, good afternoon. I'm still waiting on that speaker he introduced to come up. Not quite sure where that was, but again, I want to thank you all for the warm welcome and for joining us here today. Thank you, Mayor, and your team for allowing me to be a part of this program. Thank you all veterans and families and supporters for braving the elements and coming out to be a part of this program and helping us pay tribute and remember veterans on this Memorial Day. Now, I'm often asked, what does Memorial Day mean to me? And to me, Memorial Day is a time to reflect on those veterans who have given their lives in defense of this nation. It's a time to say thank you and remember those who have given the full measure of devotion so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy today. I'm often reminded of the expression, all gave some and some gave all. All gave some and some gave all. That expression is so eloquently describes and captures the essence of Memorial Day as we honor veterans on this day. But to me, when I think of Memorial Day, I want to make sure that all veterans are recognized, all veterans that paid the ultimate sacrifice are recognized on this day. There are countless of veterans who never got to receive the full measure of devotion from a grateful nation. So what I want to do today is I want to share a story with you about a group of veterans who had a powerful impact on shaping the nation and the military that we know today. I want to tell you the story of the Montford Point Marines. Now, some of you may ask, who are the Montford Point Marines? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Montford Point Marines were the first African Americans allowed to serve in the United States Marine Corps. Now, I said allowed, and some of you can fathom that concept for a second, because there was a time in our country where blacks were not allowed to serve in the military. The year was 1941. World War II was raging abroad, but America had a different battle raging within her shores, and that was the battle for racial equality. Years after the Civil War had ended, and amendments had passed that gave minorities the right to vote, there was still one basic right being denied to African Americans in America, and that was the right to serve in our nation's military. The civil rights activists met with the current administration and asked them to change this policy, and if they didn't, they were going to march on Washington. The administration agreed, and in 1941, President Roosevelt passed Executive Order 8802, which in essence said that all Americans had the right to serve in our nation's military. Now, this wasn't a popular decision back then. There were a lot of stereotypes that people were using to keep minorities out of the military. There was one person in particular that I want to bring up about this. This was General Thomas Holcomb. He was the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time. He was asked his opinion on blacks serving in the Marine Corps, and he stated, "If I had a choice of 5,000 whites or 250,000 Negroes, I choose the whites." So this is the headwind that Montford Pointers were going into when trying to get into an organization where they wouldn't welcome initially. But luckily for them, it was an executive order, and of course, it had to be executed. But while they couldn't stop them from coming into the military, what they could do was alter how that went. So all people that know the Marine Corps know we train in one or two places. East Coast Marines train at Parris Island, South Carolina. West Coast Marines train in San Diego, California. But what they did for the black Marines in 1942 when they enlisted is they put them in a little known area outside of Camp Lejeune called Montford Point Camp. It was a undeveloped wooded area, trees and swamps, and they put them there to keep them separate from the rest of the Marines. The mindset at the time was that they were going to come in, we were going to prove that they wasn't worthy, and when they wash out, there would be no impact to the Marine Corps. But the Montford Pointers didn't get that memo. They trained hard, and when they trained, they broke records, long-standing records held by their white counterparts. They trained so hard, in fact, that they eventually made their way into combat. But even in combat during World War II, they reserved them to support roles: cooks, ammo handlers, litter bearers, stewards. But combat has a funny way of making things even in battle. So as the front lines got depleted, casualties mounted, in come these black Marines to clean up the battlefield, to move the wounded, but they all had rifles and ammo. So they find themselves being thrust into frontline action. And they did what all Marines do. They executed. They performed so well, in fact, that the new Commandant, General Vanderbilt, had a quote after the Battle of Saipan. And he quoted, "The Negro Marines are no longer on trial. They are Marines, period." So that, in essence, ended the experiment of the Montford Point Marines. Their success led to the end of segregation in the military, because in 1948, the Truman administration passed an executive order which stated that all service must integrate, no more separate training facilities. Now, the National Montford Point Marine Association, we are charged with preserving the legacy of these Montford Pointers. We have 29 chapters across 20 states. I represent Atlanta Chapter 5. Our mission is to preserve the legacy of the Montford Point Marines by conducting community engagement activities aimed at educating the public on their service and sacrifice. Now, if you take nothing away from my conversation today, I want you to remember some startling numbers. There are about 20,000 African American men that answered the call to train at Montford Point Camp between 1942 and 1949. They were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 2012 for their service and sacrifice to this nation. For those that don't know, the Congressional Gold Medal is the highest civilian award that can be bestowed by Congress. Of that 20,000 that served between 1942 and 1949, our association has found just over 3,000 and issued the Congressional Gold Medal. So there's a lot of Montford Pointers out there who've never been identified. So when asking me about Memorial Day, my goal is to push this cause so that all veterans who have given the full measure of devotion are recognized on this day. So the chapter continues to do engagements such as this, where we tell the story of the Montford Point Marines, because we're hoping that that word will make it to a family who can say that their loved one may have served at Montford Point Camp, and if they contact the association, then we can present the Congressional Gold Medal to that family on behalf of their Montford Pointer. Now some of you may ask, why such a small number have been found to this day? Well, you have to put it in context. When the Montford Pointers served, many of them were discharged after World War II. They didn't come home to a hero's welcome. They came home to the same racism and segregation that they faced before they left. The country had not evolved yet. So a lot of them did not come home and brag about their service. It left with them. They never got a chance to tell their story. They had no way of knowing then how iconic their service would be to this day. But we all know that in 1942, the Marine Corps changed forever. Because had it not been for the service of those brave few, then who knows the state of the military that would be today. So I charge you all with a call to action. Share this story. Take it to your networks. The world needs to know about the Montford Point Marines. And our goal is to find not only any living Montford Pointers, but their descendants, their families, so they too can receive the full gratitude of a grateful nation. Thank you, Norcross. Thank you for being here. Love you.
Sergeant Major Higdon, thank you so much. We appreciate those words of inspiration. And thank you all for coming out to join us today. I also want to thank Robert Rogers